In the year 1630, in the harsh and unforgiving wilderness of New England, a Puritan family stood before the leaders of their settlement. The father, William, his voice stern and unyielding, declared that the colony had strayed from the true path of God. His rigid beliefs and pride set him against the community, and he would not bend. The elders judged him obstinate and arrogant, unfit to remain within their walls. And so, William, his wife Catherine, and their 5 children were cast out from the safety of the plantation, exiled to survive alone in a land they barely knew. The family's cart creaked along the dirt path as they left behind the small comforts of civilization. The woods that surrounded them were vast, endless, and heavy with silence. Catherine clutched baby Samuel tightly against her chest, her face hollowed by grief and worry. Thomasin, their eldest daughter, sat quiet but watchful, at the cusp of womanhood and caught between childhood obedience and adult burdens. Caleb, the eldest son, walked proudly beside his father, eager to prove himself. Behind them trailed the twins, Mercy and Jonas, mischievous, wide-eyed, and too young to fully grasp the gravity of their situation. Their destination was uncertain, but William promised that God would provide. They settled on the edge of a dark forest, building a small farmstead with their own hands. A cabin rose from the earth, rough-hewn and modest, surrounded by fields they hoped would yield corn. The family knelt and prayed, believing their faith alone would protect them. Yet the forest loomed, ancient and foreboding, as though it breathed with unseen life. Its shadow lay heavy upon the fields, and from its depths came the unsettling cries of creatures, both natural and perhaps unnatural. For a time, life continued with uneasy rhythm. Then came the day Thomasin carried baby Samuel into the meadow beside the woods. She laid him on a blanket, playing peekaboo to make him laugh. Each time she covered her eyes and opened them, the infant cooed with delight. But in one fleeting moment, she lowered her hands to find the blanket empty. Samuel was gone. Thomasin's breath caught in her throat as her eyes darted frantically across the grass. She ran, calling his name, searching, but there was no sign of the child. To her family she cried of a wolf that might have snatched him, but the truth was darker. Deep in the forest, unseen by all but the audience, a figure carried Samuel into a hut. There, by candlelight, a hag prepared an unholy ritual. The child's flesh was used in a grisly ointment, smeared across the witch's skin. In the following scene, she stood bathed in moonlight, chanting, her body rising slowly into the air. Samuel was no more. The family, not knowing this horror, mourned bitterly. Catherine wept and wailed, refusing to be consoled. Her grief turned into suspicion, her gaze lingering on Thomasin, as if the girl bore some hidden guilt. William tried to lead his family in prayer, but his voice faltered, for the crops began to wither in the field. The corn rotted, blackened by blight. Food grew scarce, and animals grew restless. Their goat, Black Phillip, pranced and butted with wild defiance, while the horse shied at unseen terrors. The children whispered dark songs about Black Phillip, claiming he spoke to them, though none took it seriously, or perhaps none dared. Caleb, brave and earnest, watched his father struggle. One morning, he slipped into the forest with Thomasin to check the traps, hoping to bring back food. But the woods were no place for innocence. They became lost among the towering trees, and Caleb wandered further, his breath quickening in the cold mist. There, in a clearing, he saw a woman emerge from a small hut. Her beauty was startling, her figure draped in red, her eyes drawing him forward. She beckoned with a smile, and though he hesitated, his young heart pounded with both fear and yearning. She kissed him, her lips full and inviting. But in an instant, her face twisted, her hand gnarled and claw-like as it seized his neck. Darkness swallowed him. Hours later, the family found Caleb at the edge of the farm, naked, trembling, and barely alive. They carried him inside, where he gasped and moaned, his eyes rolling with fever. His skin burned with sweat, and his body convulsed. When he coughed, an apple spilled from his mouth, bloodied and unnatural. His cries turned to delirious prayer, his words both rapturous and terrible. At last, with one final declaration of love for Christ, Caleb collapsed lifeless, leaving his family in despair. Catherine fell to the floor, broken beyond comfort. Mercy and Jonas turned their sharp little eyes toward Thomasin. They shrieked that she was the witch, that she had cursed Caleb and stolen Samuel. They accused her of speaking with Black Phillip in the field. Thomason, cornered and furious, shouted back that it was they who spoke with the goat, chanting songs and playing with darkness. The house filled with shouting and prayer, the family turning against itself, faith twisted into fear. William, desperate and bewildered, chose a grim solution. He locked Thomason, the twins, and Black Phillip together in the barn. He prayed that God would reveal the truth by morning. Inside, Thomason pleaded with her siblings, but they turned their backs on her. Night fell, heavy and suffocating. Catherine, meanwhile, dreamed of reunion. In her vision, she saw Samuel once more, healthy and smiling. She gathered him in her arms, overjoyed. Caleb stood by her side, comforting her. Yet in reality, she sat in the dim cabin, her breast bared to a raven that pecked mercilessly at her flesh. Blood dripped down her gown as she gazed on with blissful delusion, lost in her dream. Back in the barn, the children stirred. In the shadows loomed a shape. The witch, crouched by the goats, her twisted form lit faintly by the moon. She cackled low as she drank from the animals. The children screamed, and the barn shuddered with chaos. By dawn, the barn lay in ruins. The twins had vanished without a trace, and Thomason awoke amidst the wreckage, dazed and bloodied. William staggered outside to find the destruction. His eyes fell on Black Phillip, who stood watching him. Rage and despair welled up, and William cried out to God, demanding truth. In a final act of desperation, he faced the goat head-on. But Black Phillip lowered his horns and charged, goring him with brutal force. William staggered, dropping his axe, and collapsed into a pile of wood he had stacked with his own hands. The weight crushed him, and his last breath slipped into silence. Catherine emerged from the cabin, her nightgown stained with blood. She saw her husband dead, her children gone, and only Thomason standing. Grief turned to madness. She screamed that Thomason was a witch, that she had killed her father and brothers. In a frenzy, she leapt upon her daughter, clawing and beating. Thomason fought back, sobbing, and in her terror and desperation, she seized a billhook. With one desperate strike, she killed her mother. Catherine's body fell limp, her eyes frozen in rage. Silence fell over the farm. Thomason, drenched in sweat and blood, stumbled out into the yard. She sat down, her face blank, her breaths ragged. The sun sank behind the trees, and the world grew still. She was the last of her family, left with nothing but the eerie cries of the forest and the shadow of Black Phillip. Hours passed before she rose, her body heavy with exhaustion. She walked to the goat pen, her eyes fixed on the black animal that had stood so silently, so ominously, throughout their suffering. With trembling lips, she whispered for him to speak. At first, nothing came. Then a voice, low and smooth, echoed in the darkness. It was not the bleating of a goat, but the whisper of a man. "Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?" The words cut through the night like temptation itself. Black Phillip promised her butter, fine clothes, freedom, and the taste of a life she had never known. All he required was her name in his book. Thomason hesitated, trembling with fear and desire. With no family left, no home, and no future, she stepped into the darkness and agreed. She signed her name. Stripping away the last remnants of her old life, she removed her dress and walked naked into the forest, following Black Phillip's unseen form. The trees closed around her, the firelight of torches flickered ahead. She emerged into a clearing where women gathered in a circle, chanting, their bodies swaying with ecstasy. The witches danced wildly around a fire that roared into the sky. Their voices rose in eerie unison, filling the night with unholy song. As the ritual reached its height, one by one, the witches began to rise. Their feet left the ground, their bodies soaring upward. Their laughter echoed, shrill and triumphant. Thomason stood at the edge, watching with awe and fear. Then, slowly, she too began to rise. Her body lifted into the air, her hair whipping in the wind. At first her face was tight with disbelief, then with release. A smile spread across her lips. She laughed, not with madness, but with liberation. All the weight of fear, repression, and grief fell away. The girl who once prayed to a god that abandoned her now soared into the night, reborn in darkness. And in the black sky above the forest, Thomason joined the coven, free at last.